Welcome to Stories at The Way LA. My name is Pastor Sam. I'm one of the pastors with The Way LA, and we have a special guest today who's going to be sharing his story. His name is Isaac. Isaac, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, brother. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you, Sam.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure, man. And, today we're going to be sharing a little bit about your story, and your story is going to bring a lot of hope to a lot of people today. I know a little bit about your story. I know Pastor Gabe knows a little bit and people at the church. But for those who don't know about your story, one question I have is, what is your family life like when you were growing up? What was that like? What was your life like really before you had met and decided to follow Jesus?
Yeah, so as a child growing up, as far back as I can remember, there was a lot of generational things that were passed down from relatives, older siblings, uncles, parents, things of that nature. And what that looked like was a lot of affiliation to the streets, a lot of affiliation to the, I would say more so the gangs, and a lot of habits that were destructive to life patterns, a lot of addictions to alcohol, drugs, things of that nature. And when I was a young child, being exposed to these certain things, it also opened up my perspective to things that I shouldn't have seen at that age, which along the lines of the journey of growing up opened up a new mindset for me to take on a different type of lifestyle that some children are not exposed to. And it kind of directed the course of my life in a negative sense.
And how old were you when you were exposed to some of those things?
Some traumatic experiences that I had started at as early as the age of 6, I would say, that I can remember, that were pretty traumatic. Being pushed down on the floor, trying to duck down from threats of other neighborhoods, drive-bys, seeing weapons in and out of the household, older siblings, bringing in and out, drug paraphernalia and, doing business and things of that nature. So as early as 6 years old, I can say I started seeing some things that weren't normal to just a regular household.
Right, just being exposed to those things. And to your remembrance, do you remember if there was any ever kind of like major traumatic event that you had been through from age 6 to however old you were when you decided to move out, there in your family, the way you had grown up, there in the neighborhood? I know you mentioned there was a little bit of like a lot of violence that was taking place, not only maybe domestic, but also like maybe out in the streets as well. Was there any kind of events that come up that really bring up like the struggle that was real for you back then?
Yeah, of course. So the things that were pretty impactful on my life back then was the simple fact of my mom was a single mom, raising 10 children. So our means really weren't where they were supposed to be as far as financially. We kind of lived in a position where we had to be very careful with what we could do and couldn't do, just due to the fact my mom was doing what she could. But that entails a lifestyle that's less than others. So it puts you in a position where you start gaining insecurities, and you start, looking at life from a disadvantage, and you start wondering, is there anything that I can do outside of this to be able to get what I want? And at that time, I was a young kid, seeing materialistic things, watching my older siblings in the drug game, doing what they had to do to make ends meet.
Your examples, basically, right there.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what happened was I started picking up a paradigm that wasn't even mine. I started watching my older brother modeling examples that I started being intrigued with. Before I knew it, I started taking on those examples and applying them into my own life, carried out into actions of me starting to get myself involved with the drug scene and things of that nature. But going back to your question, as far as things that I had seen, as early as I can remember, I seen a homicide that had took place in my neighborhood. It was in the back alley of my house. An individual had suffered a couple gunshot wounds and was laying face down in the alleyway. But I was exposed to that. I seen it. I was able to see that experience at that age, the death that was there, that was present. And it, in a way, became a normality, I would have to say. Something that would be shocking to others became a normality in the environment that I lived in. There was things inside of the home that I was exposed to, and I knew they were wrong. But at the same time, though, it was benefiting the household, the bills to be paid, things of that nature. So it was more so like, yeah, this is wrong, but we're not going to say anything to anybody about it because this is what's benefiting us at the time. And
like sweep it under the rug.
Correct.
Kind of. Okay.
So when you're exposed to certain things like that and you're told not to say anything about it, what happens is it becomes normal and you become complacent with it, and it becomes life, and it just becomes a day-to-day. And that opens you up to the opportunity to just feel in yourself that it's okay. You know, if my older sibling's doing it, then why can't I do it? You know, and if he's benefiting from it, why can't I benefit from it? So seeing those types of things and having that type of environment kind of just molded me and shaped me into the person I was before I knew God.
And, you know, kind of going back to, I mean, you have these examples like your brother, you know, you have siblings that maybe were involved in this as well. Your family kind of treated it as if it was like an everyday life type thing, right? Because they did have those needs as well that weren't necessarily being met. So they had to do what they had to do. Kind of looking at everything that you had been through, even, you know, from the young age, kind of growing up as well. How did you deal with a lot of that, whether it be pressure, exposure, it could even be altercations, things that may have happened when you were maybe just trying to defend your family or your brothers. I have a brother. I'd do anything for my brother, you know. But really, how did you deal with a lot of those emotions and, you know, battles that you had to go through? It's much different when you're a Christian because you have God and you have that godly community, but you didn't necessarily know God and have a relationship with him back then. So what did it look like for you to deal with something like that? Like what did you run to, you know, drugs? Was it relationships? What was it for you?
Yeah, so the way I used to navigate through that, I had another sibling of mine who was older than the one that I was looking up to. And he was more so of the one that went in the right direction, schooling, you know, got a job at a very young age, took care of his family. So he was the one that was really implementing a lot of good characteristics into my life. And I started more so focusing on him because that was the positive in my life. So I wanted to be what he was. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to do good. I wanted to be in sports. I wanted to do these types of things. My father wasn't present, so that was he was a way of navigation through the hard moments, through the times where I really needed to lean on somebody and gain information and, you know, just learn life and how to be a man and things of that nature. But at the age of 15, he was murdered in front of me. And in the process of that experience itself was a downward spiral in my life. I would have to say that really took a part of me with him when he passed. I was very close to him. He was a father figure in a sense. Even though he was my brother, I looked at him like a father. And when that had happened, that's when I kind of took on to learning new ways of navigating through pain and emotion and trials and those types of things that would face me in this life. And in that moment was when I took on drug addiction, alcoholism, womanizing, trying to go from relationship to relationship, trying to figure out if that was the answer, if the drinking was the answer, if the drugs were the answer. So it wasn't really until the age of 15 that I started partaking in the addictions that would, you know, become a stronghold in my life after his murder. Before that, I was more so focused on sports and things of that nature. I was still hanging around the neighborhood, still hanging around with kids that were growing up in the neighborhood with me, but I wasn't really active in the neighborhood. I was more so like a hang around, associate. I wasn't really partaking in the criminal activity yet to the level that I was about to after the age of 15. I was kind of just claiming the neighborhood. I'm from this side of the city, and it was more so just hanging around with some of the guys. But it wasn't until the age of 15 when my brother was murdered that I really dove deep into the street life, and also just getting involved in more criminal activity, which would lead to me at the age of 19 facing an 80-year sentence, fighting that for 4 years, doing 6 years on that, turned into a 10-year journey concerning that case. And that's really where that started at. But even dialing back a little bit to just my mom being a single mother and being raised by my mom, and after she lost my brother, she was very emotional. So what happens is when you don't have a man in the house or a man to direct another man, and you're raised by a woman, you tend to become very emotional in a sense. And it wasn't like I was crying or I was depressed or sad. I became very angry because I didn't know how to deal with the things that were going on in my life. And I would see my mom trying to deal with them, but still trying to raise children. And she was very emotional. So I would take it in a sense of holding it in and allowing it to come out in the form of violence or rage or anger.
Like blowing up.
I would explode. Yes.
Definitely. Well, I can definitely say, from experience too, my mom was, my parents had divorced, and, I grew up with my mom having to, take care of me and my brother here and there. And, it definitely takes a toll on you, seeing your mom have to play both roles at times. And so, I know that you had shared with me that your brother had passed. And I'm sure you guys were like super close. I mean, that's your brother, could you explain to us just a little bit about kind of maybe the situation, as many details as you could possibly share for that other person that maybe did lose a loved one to the type of lifestyle that they were living? And then maybe if you could share, as we get into your transformation in following Jesus, how the forgiveness maybe of the person that had done what they had did, how that tied into how good God is and how God truly protected you and saved you, even from maybe a few different things that could have happened if you had handled that in the wrong way. Could you just share a little bit kind of more about really where did that tie into your relationship with God? Did that take you into a direction of being more desperate for him? And then kind of where did that go?
Yeah. So after my brother had passed, what that did was it opened me up to a new level of aggression and anger and violence. I wanted nothing to do with God at that point. In my own perspective, I felt like God was responsible for my brother's death. Like, why would my brother get killed when he was the only thing in my life that was positive? So in a sense, I was blaming God, not understanding the full concept of when you carry out certain actions, there's consequences. When you're involved into certain lifestyles and things, there's always repercussions for certain things that may transpire in those moments. And what happened is, we were all out. We were having a good time in a sense to the world, in my mindset back then. And it just so happened that an altercation had started between a relative of mine and a couple individuals that we didn't know. A fight broke out. As the fight broke out, there was a knife pulled, and my brother was struck twice, once in the stomach, once in the heart, severed the main artery in his heart. I literally drove up seconds after he had been stabbed. So when I had arrived, I seen him already holding his chest, walking towards me. I was, I got out of the car and I was walking towards the scene, and he was already walking away from it. So we met in the middle of the street. Well, when we met in the middle of the street, I couldn't really tell what was going on with him. I knew he was injured, but I didn't know how severe it was until he kneeled down. When he kneeled down, in the middle of the street, he was kind of like hunched over, and then he sat back. Well, when he sat back, so if you can just imagine, he sat straight down on his butt. So, and then he just laid back. And when he laid back, his knees were still up, his feet were planted on the ground, but he was just laying in the middle of the street. So at this time, I knew that it was something severe. So by the time I walked over to him, I was kind of jogging in a sense, and I was talking to him. I was calling out his name, and I looked at him. His eyes already were getting glossy. They had a glaze over them, and I could already hear him trying to gasp for air, but he was already choking on his blood because they had severed the main artery in his heart, but also punctured the lung. So at that moment, I knew in instinct, what do? Do I go after the individual to try to seek revenge in that moment? Or do I get my brother to the hospital? So this isn't a split second. I'm thinking about all this stuff. What do I do? You know, my instinct wants to go from rage to defend my brother and to seek revenge on his behalf. But at the same time, though, I know my brother's losing his life and seconds are valuable at this point. So what I did is I asked another relative of mine, can you please help me get my brother into the car? We got him into the car. I drove him to the hospital. He ended up passing away when we got to the hospital. And what that did is it really put me in a position where I put up a wall with God. I didn't want nothing to do with God. So in the process of that, I just became very hard, desensitized, no emotion. And then seeing my mom deal with it even put me in a further position from the Lord where I was just like, how could you allow my mom to go through this? How could you, allow this to happen to our family? And like I said, I was just ignorant to the fact back then that the things the things that we were involved in all have repercussions, and those actions do carry out consequences. So how I navigated through that was just getting deeper into the streets, hanging around with my friends more, being more involved in violence, to try to have that as an outlet to relieve myself from the built up pressures that I was dealing with on the inside. And that would lead me into a circumstance where years later, another one of my brothers was in the same position at a party, being stabbed. This time I was carrying a firearm, and what happened there was I opened fire. I let off a warning shot. The fight kept on. The knife, the guy that was wielding the knife kept on swinging the knife, and I opened fire on the individual. Unfortunately, he lost his life. Another individual was struck and wounded as well, and I had to face the consequences of those actions. And me, who I was as a person, one thing that my brother had left me with before he passed away was like, no matter what you do as a man, you always face the consequences. Whoever you're going to be, that's fine. But whatever actions you carry out are going to have consequences. And if you face those consequences as a man, then at least you're doing your part in knowing and accepting that's the lifestyle you want to live, but also accepting the fact that there are going to be hard consequences for living that lifestyle. So with that being said, I turned myself in, and that's where I embarked on a journey of 10 years total, where I had to face an 80-year sentence for the crime that was committed. And I ended up pleading guilty to a self-defense manslaughter, furnishing a firearm in the defense of others. And I fought it for 4 years. I served 6 years after I signed my deal, and I went away to do my time. And I wish I can say that going to prison really just altered my mindset, and I came home and I started doing right, but that wasn't the case. When I came home, I went back out into the streets. I faced a lot of rejection from jobs and corporations and different types of opportunities because of my record and the violence that was on my record. A lot of people didn't want to take a chance on having a person like me in an environment because they didn't know how hostile I could be. So it kind of changed their perspective on me once my background would pop up. So I faced a lot of rejection. So I found myself back in the streets. doing what I had to do to put money in my pocket. And that's kind of where I was for quite a bit of time.
Yeah. And during that quite a bit of time, you were just doing maybe what you knew you would do, like things that you'd done when you were younger. And you were just trying to make it, trying to get by day to day, get by, right? I want to fast forward now, kind of hearing your story for everyone who's listening. People have now found a common ground with you, and how struggles are handled, without God, maybe. Now let's kind of take it to a place where, fast forward. I want you to, if you could share like how old you were, how long ago maybe was it after you had come out of prison that you decided to give your life to Jesus, to follow after Jesus, to say Jesus is going to be my reason as to why I change, and he's going to be my success, and I want what God has for me and not what I may have for myself or the life that I have for me, but I want God's lifestyle for myself. When did you come to that place, and like, how did you get to that place where you're just in complete surrender and you're ready for change?
Well, I wish it could say it came from a place of where I was already in a church setting and there was some good brothers in Christ that were just, ministering to me and giving me the word of God. And I just had this shift of mindset. This is what I want for my life. But it was a little bit on the ugly side. It's not anything that I'm proud of, but this is how it happened. I got in a really bad bar fight, right? I hurt an individual severely. And I said to myself, after committing that act there, when I went back home that night, I said to myself, wow, either I'm going to end up back in prison or I'm going to end up dead. These are my only two options. I've always known this because that was a lifestyle that I lived. That was a risk I took. But it was something different this time. There was something internally that was heavy on my heart that I hadn't felt in years and years and years. I know what it is now. Now it's conviction. I started feeling a sense of conviction and remorse for the individual that I had hurt in this bar fight. And I couldn't understand why, because I had become desensitized from my brother's murder. I had lived a lifestyle of violence. And I couldn't understand why now I was feeling the way that I was feeling. And I started trying to talk myself out of it. Like, why are you feeling like this? I started, talking down on myself within myself. You're acting like, for a lack of better terms, like, a punk or a lame or, things of that nature. And as a weakness, I was like, this is a weakness. This isn't something that you associate with. You are who you are. You've built this reputation in the streets. This is not you. So why are you feeling like this? But I didn't know at the time that it was God already speaking into my life. It was the Holy Spirit already talking to my heart. And it was a couple of days later that I had kept feeling this conviction that was heavy on me. So I remember the day I was in my room, I was counting money. I had, paraphernalia on the bed. I was going to make a drop off. I was going to pick up more paraphernalia. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, man, I have to have a greater purpose than this. This cannot be what my life is going to be until the day I die. There has to be something better than this, because I'm not happy in the position that I'm in right now. I've tried to achieve everything I could in the streets, everything I could in being a womanizer, a ladies' man, relationships. I've tried to achieve everything to the maximum potential that I could in the streets, but I was still unfulfilled. I was still lacking within myself. When the friends were gone, the women were gone, the drinks weren't flowing, I was still lonely. I was sad. And there was no amount of money, women, or violence, or anything of that nature that can fill this void that was within me. So it was at that moment that I just said these words to God, and I didn't hear his voice audibly. I didn't hear anything externally. It was all internally. Everything that I felt was internally. But that's how I knew it was real. I knew it was real because it was internal. It wasn't from an outside influence. And it was just between me and God at this time, and me not even knowing it, but me just giving it an opportunity at that moment and saying, God, if you are who you say you are and you can do what you say you can do, I've seen you do it for others, then show me. That's all I want. I want the women gone. I want the drugs gone. I want the addiction gone. I want the desire to be a image in the neighborhood gone. I want all of it gone. I'm just tired.
You just surrendered it all.
I just surrendered it all right there. And it didn't happen overnight. This is something that took place over the next month, that slowly but surely I started losing the taste for alcohol. I started losing the desire for drugs. I started losing the desire to be involved in certain things in the streets. And it was at that point that I said, you know what? I told my wife, who's now my wife, at the time she was just my girlfriend, I had told her, you know what? I'm going to go check out the church. I'm going to go to the Way, because it was something that I had heard about through relatives, and my sister was attending, and they would invite me, and I had been there a couple times, and I felt like it was a great, community. It was a beautiful setting, but it just wasn't for me at the time. But I knew in my heart that was a place that I felt peace, felt comfort. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to see what it's about, and I'm going to give it a shot, And that's what I did. I went down there and I gave it a shot. And it was in that moment that God didn't get a hold of me first. God got a hold of my wife at the time first. And at the time, my wife was an atheist. She didn't believe in God. She just went there to support me. And when she went there to support me, God moved in her life quicker than he had moved in my life. And I was taught about God all through my life growing up from my mom. But the thing was I wanted nothing to do with God. I wanted to live a lifestyle apart from God. And so when he got a hold of my wife, it encouraged me and inspired me. And what it told me was, if God can get a hold of somebody who doesn't believe that there is a God, then I know God is real. So that's when I started letting my guard down. That's when I started getting more involved, and I started applying myself into the word and into prayer and things of that nature. And that's where I found myself in that moment. But it wasn't an easy transition. It was a very hard transition. I didn't know who Isaac was. Isaac was no longer around from a young child, from the age of 15 and up. There was no longer Isaac. It was my street name. It was who I built myself to be out there. The self-image, the false identity is what I've come to identify with. So,
and with that identity is tied all those things.
Correct.
Yeah.
So apart from that, I didn't even know who I was. It was like being a baby all over again, learning how to walk, talk, think. And it was very hard because I didn't know who I was outside of that identity. And in that identity, I had respect, I had fear, I had all these things that people would feel when I would be around them and that I would thrive off of. I would rather be feared than respected in some cases when I would go into certain places, because I knew that nobody would step out of line and I would have my way with whatever I wanted. So
back to this identity, you have a new identity now, right? You had given your life to God. You mentioned it was a process. It was a tough transition, but you had transitioned.
Correct.
So kind of looking at the new identity now that you had, that you have now, what would you say helped you in really understanding that identity more and understanding the power, the blessings, the joy, the peace, all of those things that come with that identity in Christ? Would you say that mentorship, discipleship, the church, services, what was it for you that really helped develop in that identity and to where you could now see this new creature, this new person that God had created you to be?
Yeah, so for me, it would be repetition. It would be applying what you learn. Because if you go and sit in a service and you hear what the pastor has to give, but you never apply it to your life, then it don't ever take root in you. It don't ever become a pattern, a lifestyle, a way of living. it only becomes a word of knowledge that goes in one ear and out the other. But it's not until you really start applying it into your own life, the mentorship, the prayers, your own time with God, your intimate time with God. That's the biggest thing for me through the transition, was me getting in a secret place with the Lord and really just allowing him to start speaking into my life. And I didn't even know how that looked, because I didn't know how to pray. I didn't really know what to say.
Right.
But what I did was I would just be honest. I would tell God how I was feeling in the moment. Even if I was feeling doubtful towards him, even if I was feeling angry towards him, even if I was feeling a sense of hurt towards him, he already knows my thoughts anyways. So why not be honest when you come before him?
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
nothing you can hide from him.
Yeah.
So it was in those moments of me just being honest with him that he was highlighting certain things in me that I was still trying to hold on to within myself. And those were the things I started learning how to pray for: the pride, the arrogance. You know, I started praying against the anger, the rage, the anxiety, you know, all these things that were rising up in me that I was just explaining to him. This is how I'm feeling today, Lord. This is what I feel. Why am I feeling like this? Why am I mad at you? Why am I angry with who you're trying to bring me to be in this day? Why do I at times think about reverting back to the old ways? And the reason why that we think about reverting back to the old ways is because we always want to find a path that's easiest to walk, rather than go into the wilderness with God.
That's so true.
And learn his ways and learn his directions. So in those moments in my transition, the most impactful times was me just getting before the Lord by myself. You know, everything else was a bonus. All the mentorship, all the brotherhood, you know, all the classes, that's all a bonus.
That's so true.
But the intimate time with God, that's where true transition happens.
That's so good. And I like how you said, really, it was the application.
Correct.
Right? Like an application goes hand in hand with devotion, and you're taking what you're learning and you're applying it. Taking what you're learning, you're applying. Something we can all do, right? But so many of us can fall short in that. And it's just so powerful hearing about the transformation that took place. And, you know, just as simple as application is, so can this transition be for someone else, you know, and someone's watching right now, you know, that maybe went through the exact same thing that you went through. Or maybe they went through something similar. Maybe they were seeing it on the outside, but never truly got as involved. You know, I'm sure that they're thankful that they didn't, because like you said, there are consequences to our actions in every area, and God protected you. You know, he took care of you and he changed you, transformed you. I'd love for everybody who's watching to be able to hear a little bit about what's next for Isaac. I know you just had a baby. Can you share a little bit what's going on right now in your life, man? How is God using you, and how do you feel he's going to be using you in these next few years?
For sure. And then one thing I just want to highlight that you had said is, somebody who may be in my position back when I was first transitioning into the Lord, my biggest thing I can say is that take a good, hard look at the life that you're living now and just really think to yourself, am I living my life, or am I living a life that was modeled by somebody else? Am I living who I'm supposed to be, or am I living who somebody else is or was in my life, and I just carried on those habits and carried on those patterns? So what we want to do is we want to really just analyze that, because outside of that, there's still a whole new creation of who you're really supposed to be, who God has called you to be. And God has so much more for you than that lifestyle that you've picked up from somebody else. Those thought patterns, the way of living, the actions you're carrying out are usually influenced by somebody that has been of a strong influence in your life. So now what's next for me and for my family, and yes, thank you. I did just have a young boy, Asher.
Right.
He's a blessing to the family. You know, he's 2 weeks old as of Saturday.
That's awesome.
So we're really excited about that. You know, we're just embarking on the new journey of being a family, moving in unity.
Yeah.
We're also a blended family. So there's a lot of different attributes about that are difficult to navigate as well. Yeah. So if there's anybody watching and you're part of a blended family, I know that could be complicated, but just put God as the center point.
Right.
That's my advice to you. Put God as the center point.
That's good.
Make sure that you're moving in unity with your significant other, your spouse. Make sure that you guys are always in agreement. Make sure you guys are praying together. Make sure that you guys are just surrendering everything over to the Lord. You know, all your thoughts, your will, your emotion. Allow the Holy Spirit to come in and just speak to your soul, and just to really just guide you and help you navigate through life and in the challenges that it has. And then also, I'm now a business owner,
Yeah.
a husband,
Come on, man.
a father. I'm present in my children's life now. You know, I'm not out running the streets and getting involved in a lot of things where I'm losing time with them. So I'm learning how to build those relationships. I'm learning how to step into the husband position in the role, because this is my first time in marriage. Like I said, I didn't have my father, so learning how to step into a position of being a man and taking care of things within your own home can be challenging when you didn't have a father present in your life. But I just thank God that he's present in my life now, and I lean on my heavenly Father to direct me, to guide me, to show me, and to teach me good stewardship of the things that he's entrusted to me, which is, you know, my home, my wife, my children, as well as all the business opportunities that come my way.
Yeah.
Things of that nature.
That's awesome, man. Now, I know that we're believing there's going to be 7 churches in Los Angeles, you know, and I know we're getting excited about that. What role, or even, you know, just has God been speaking to you a little bit about how you can play a part in LA and in the things that, you know, we're going to be doing? I know that there was a little bit of a story about a guy that you had reached on the streets when we were first in LA. And, you know, we'll probably go to that in the offering moment, but, you know, what do you feel like God has kind of given you a heart for in the people of LA? Do you feel like you're called to really reach people who had been where you had been, in the drugs, in the scenes of the neighborhood, maybe with broken families like that? Like, kind of where do you feel like God has directed you now?
Yeah, so there was a season, right, when I was out with the LA team building the Compton campus, and it was a phenomenal experience. Me and my wife were out there hitting the streets. And you were there with us, so you know. I mean, we were door to door. You know, we were in the parks. We were on the streets. It was the realest form of ministry. I really felt like it was like Jesus and the disciples back in the day,
right there,
you know, just walking around it. But LA's really left an impression and a mark on my heart. And I always desire to be back in LA. And I know that's coming soon. You know, me and Gabriel been talking about it, and I know that that's something that's going to be coming soon, where we're going to be back out here in the streets with you guys. But it was a beautiful season. I think it was about a year that we were out here together, right. You know, really just trekking uncharted territory. Yep. And just
you taught me keep my head on a swivel.
Keep your head on a swivel.
Like the swivel chair.
Correct.
We're on right now.
especially when you're in an environment that you're not familiar with.
That's right.
But yeah, no, there was a run-in I had with an individual. He was actually staying in a motorhome that was parked in front of a friend's house on the street. Comes from the same lifestyle, same background, you know. So me and him really just had hit it off. He ended up knowing individuals that I knew. We had done time with certain individuals that we both were familiar with. So it opened up that line of communication. It even built a form of trust in a small amount of time, to where I was really able to minister into his life. I would love to say it was a power story and he transitioned and he's on fire for God now. And he may be. I mean, if he's watching now, who knows?
The seeds.
If not, the seed was planted.
That's right.
You know, I was able to spend a lot of time with him. I was able to always go and see him on a weekly basis and bring him some necessities that he had needed, because he was facing some hard times.
Right there in his RV.
Right there in his RV. But yeah, no, definitely, bro. I'm excited to be part of all this. You know, I can't wait to get back out here, and the campuses that are going to be, you know, coming up and established. We're looking forward and trying to see where me and my wife fit in that whole structure, and we will be leading one of the campuses out here in LA. We don't know which one yet, but you know, we're open wherever God needs us.
It'll be awesome.